My name is Elena Ramirez. I'm 35, and I never thought the most unforgettable night of my father's life would become the night my family was forced to see me, really see me, for the first time. You see, in my family, art was never a real career. It was a phase, a soft little hobby girls grew out of. And if you didn't grow out of it, well, then you were just being dramatic. I was born and raised in Miami, the first child of Carmen and Luis Ramirez, first-generation Cuban immigrants who worked hard to build their lives from nothing. My mom runs a real estate firm now, my dad is a quiet man who spent 40 years in construction, and my younger brother Diego, oh, he's the crown jewel. MBA, investment banking, perfect suits, perfect jawline, perfect everything. And me, I was the one who made puppets out of socks and turned the living room into a stage. From the moment I was old enough to speak, I knew I didn't fit the mold. I wasn't the daughter who brought home straight A's in math or wore pastel skirts to church. I wore oversized flannel shirts and carried a tattered journal full of unfinished monologues. I wasn't rebellious, just invisible. Diego got full support when he chose his business school path. Every extra tutoring session, every flight for campus visits, Mom was there. When I told them I wanted to attend a small liberal arts college in Chicago to study theater directing, my mother looked at me like I'd just announced I was joining the circus. Her exact words? "Mija, we didn't immigrate here for you to end up begging for rent in some basement playhouse." So I did it without them. I paid for school with student loans, scholarships, and working 3 jobs. I was a coat check girl at a jazz bar, a cashier at a bookstore, and a nighttime usher at a second-tier theater in Chicago. It was exhausting. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But somehow, I kept going. What my family never knew, because they never asked, was that I rose, slowly, stubbornly, quietly. I directed small plays, then regional productions. I made connections in the indie scene, and at 29, I met Judith Leland, a retired theater patron, who saw one of my shows and pulled me aside. "You don't just direct," she said, "you architect emotion." She invested in me, not just with money, but with belief. With her help, I acquired a long-abandoned Art Deco theater downtown and brought it back to life. That place became The Solstice, a boutique performance house known for its daring, immersive shows. We weren't Broadway, but we weren't nothing either. Critics noticed. So did producers. So did investors. But my family? They still thought I was teaching drama at a public school somewhere. They never Googled me. They never asked. And to be honest, I stopped offering up stories that only got blank stares in return. Until something changed. 2 months ago, I got a group text from my mom. She was planning my father's 65th birthday celebration. Thinking of doing something special this year. Maybe one of those trendy downtown places. "Have you heard of a venue called The Solstice? Looks nice, but probably out of our price range." I nearly choked on my coffee. My own mother suggesting my theater, without the faintest idea that it was mine. For a moment, I considered replying, "You're texting the owner." But then something stopped me. Not spite, not arrogance, something deeper. What if this time they didn't just hear about my success, but walked straight into it? That's when I decided I wasn't going to tell them. I was going to show them. From the moment I decided not to tell them the truth, everything shifted. The silence wasn't just a shield anymore. It became my stage, my script, my spotlight. That very afternoon, I called Madeline Hart, my theater's managing director. "Madeline," I said, pacing across my office, "we're about to host a private family event, my family. They have no idea I own the Solstice." There was a pause. Then she laughed. "Wait, the family?" "The family," I confirmed, groaning. "And yes, they think I'm some struggling part-time drama teacher." "Oh my God, this is going to be epic. How dramatic do you want to go?" "Controlled dramatic," I smirked. "Think elegant mic drop." Together, we orchestrated it like a play. The Ramirez birthday dinner was to be held in our most exclusive space, the Ember Room, a velvet-draped dining area normally reserved for press galas and premieres. I instructed the chef to curate a Cuban fusion tasting menu featuring my dad's favorite dishes: ropa vieja with truffle foam, pastelitos with saffron cream, plantain fritters dusted with edible gold. We'd pair it with a 1965 vintage Bordeaux from our cellar, his birth year. Every detail mattered. Lighting, warm, golden tones, to make everything glow. Music, a soft quartet playing bolero classics, just like the ones my parents danced to at their wedding. The guest list, my mom's friends from her real estate circles, Diego and his girlfriend, their firm partners, and a few neighbors who adored showing off at social gatherings. I made sure their reservation was accepted without mention of me. The front desk quoted them a rate, only half the actual cost, while I silently covered the rest under anonymous sponsorship. 2 weeks before the event, I received a call from my mother. "Elena, are you sure you can make it? The place is a little upscale." I was standing in the Solstice's newly renovated lighting booth when she said it. The irony nearly knocked the headset off my ear. "I'll be there," I replied, cool and calm. "We're just a bit worried," she added. "It's not exactly your usual environment." "My usual environment?" I asked, half laughing. "You know, those quirky places you hang around with your theater friends. Just try not to bring any of your projects. It's Dad's night." My projects. That's what she called the work that built this place. I bit back the snark. "Don't worry," I said instead. "I'll be on time. I'll look the part." "Good," she replied curtly. "Just don't embarrass us." Those words, "don't embarrass us," stung more than I expected. But I let them land, because I knew what was coming. A week before the dinner, Diego texted me. "So you actually scored an invite, huh? Try not to show up in those weird art teacher boots, okay? The solstice has a dress code." I stared at the message for a full minute, then put my phone down without replying. I'd wear custom Carolina Herrera, thank you very much. But I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because it was time. Time they saw the truth. Time I stepped fully into the woman I'd become, not the shadow in the background. Not the punchline to family jokes. Not the daughter who chose poverty. That week, I walked the halls of the theater like a director preparing for opening night. I watched the lights get rigged, the tables get arranged, the wine bottles settled in their crystal decanters. I supervised every detail from behind the scenes, while my family still assumed I was somewhere irrelevant. 2 days before the event, I sat down with my head of security, Marcus Liu, a former Secret Service agent turned logistics genius. "Marcus," I said, "I'll be entering separately. Not with them. I need you stationed near the front lobby. The moment feels right. I'll cue you." He raised an eyebrow. "You planning to storm in with a spotlight behind you?" I smirked. "Not quite, but the truth will land like a spotlight, blinding and undeniable." He grinned. "Well then, I'll wear my best poker face." The night before the event, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, the one nestled above the theater, hidden behind layers of business names and holding companies. My name wasn't on the building, but every brick was mine. Below me, the solstice shimmered in the streetlight, humming with anticipation. It looked like any other beautiful venue from the outside. But for me, it was a cathedral built from rejection, from silence, from every time they told me I'd never make it. And tomorrow night, they'd walk right through the doors of my cathedral, completely blind to the altar I'd built. The evening of the dinner arrived crisp and clear, one of those rare Chicago nights where the city skyline shimmered under the soft haze of twilight, and everything felt like it was holding its breath. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, high above the solstice, watching black town cars roll up one by one. My family had arrived. Early, of course, always eager to impress. Through the building's internal surveillance feed, I watched them enter. My mother, Carmen, led the procession, dressed to the nines in a pearl-trimmed blazer and her favorite pumps. Her posture radiated entitlement. She immediately began scanning the foyer with her real estate-trained eyes, no doubt judging the finishes and calculating square footage per square foot. In her head, my father, Luis, followed quietly, his suit a little outdated but ironed with care. He looked uncertain, like a man who had been brought to a place he wasn't sure he belonged. Then came Diego, my younger brother, the family prodigy in his tailored navy blue suit, laughing too loudly, adjusting his Rolex every few minutes, his arms slung around his girlfriend, a sharp woman named Madeline who had all the charm of a LinkedIn profile. I took a deep breath, smoothing down the folds of my midnight green Carolina Herrera gown, sleek, powerful, utterly understated. I wore my hair swept back, diamond studs barely visible, a single silver bracelet from my mentor Judith. Everything intentional, everything precise. At 7:12 p.m., exactly 12 minutes fashionably late, I exited through the private elevator that led from my penthouse to the street, rounded the block, and re-entered through the front entrance like any other guest. The doorman greeted me with a polite nod. He knew the plan. I stepped into the theater lobby, where soft lighting glowed against golden Art Deco walls, where the air smelled faintly of jasmine and polished wood, and where music from a live trio floated like smoke. Then I saw them. My mother, standing by the ticket booth, correcting the concierge about the dinner party details. Diego, flipping through a program as if he were inspecting a stock portfolio. And then, Stephanie. Oh yes, she had arrived. Not my cousin Stephanie, not my friend Stephanie. Stephanie, Diego's girlfriend. The one who had taken a very vocal dislike to me since the first time we met. The one who told me, with her wide, polished smile, "You're so brave to follow your passion like that. I could never live without a salary." She was the first to spot me. "Elena?" she said, squinting slightly. "Wow, you clean up nice." Her voice had that condescending tone that dripped off every syllable. Before I could reply, Diego turned, eyes widening as they landed on my dress. He gave a sharp laugh. "Did someone gift you that? Looks pricey." "No," I said evenly. "I bought it myself." Then came the moment. My mother stepped forward, eyebrows arching. "You came." There was no warmth in her tone, just surprise. "You didn't think I would?" I asked softly. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Elena, this is a formal venue. It's not your open mic poetry night." Before I could answer, I felt a presence beside me. Marcus Liu, my security chief, now dressed in a crisp suit, stepped forward from the shadows. "Ms. Ramirez," he said with a nod. "May I speak with you for a moment?" My mother's face twisted. "Security, what's going on here? Elena, what did you do?" Stephanie cut in with a laugh. "Oh no, are you being escorted out? Diego, come on, let's just pay for her portion. This is embarrassing." And then she said it. "Just because you love theater doesn't mean you can afford to dine in one." I inhaled deeply, calm as still water. Then Marcus turned to them and said, with perfect composure, "Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps you're unaware that you're currently preventing the owner of this establishment from entering her own venue." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut bone. Stephanie's jaw dropped. Diego blinked, as if trying to process English for the first time. My mother paled. "What?" she whispered. Marcus nodded again, stepping aside as Madeline, my managing director, approached. "Ms. Ramirez," she said, offering her hand with theatrical flourish, "your table is ready. The 1965 Bordeaux has been decanted, and your father's playlist is cued for intermission." I smiled. "Oh, and Mama," I added, turning to face her. "Don't worry, I didn't bring any projects tonight." Then I walked past them, all of them, and entered the theater I built from nothing. As I stepped through the velvet curtains into the Ember Room, the atmosphere shifted. Everything glowed. Amber lighting, polished mahogany tables, soft strings echoing from the quartet tucked in the corner. Waiters in formal black greeted me with quiet deference. "Welcome, Ms. Ramirez." "Lovely to have you with us this evening, Ms. Ramirez." Their words weren't rehearsed. They were real. And my family? They heard every syllable. From the moment I entered, my mother, father, and brother followed, slower now, more unsure. The guests from their neighborhood and my mother's real estate circle looked around in awe, sipping champagne from fluted crystal. They didn't care whose name was on the lease. They cared about the experience, and this one was extraordinary. I walked over to my father, who stood near the main table, blinking up at the ornate chandelier I'd selected myself during a renovation trip to Prague. "Elena," he said, quiet, "this is your theater?" "All of it," I nodded. "The building, the programming, the wine list." He let out a small, breathy laugh. "It's beautiful." "Thank you," I said, keeping my tone measured. "It's been a long journey." Before he could respond, my mother cut in, her heels clicking too quickly across the tile. "Why didn't you tell us?" she demanded, her voice sharp but shaky. "Why all this secrecy? Why make a scene in front of our guests?" "A scene?" I asked calmly. "You mean the one where I was blocked from entering my own building? Or the part where Stephanie offered to pay for my dinner because she thought I couldn't afford it?" Her cheeks flushed, but her pride held strong. "You could have told us. Privately." "I tried," I said, "but you never listened." That was when Diego, ever the opportunist, found his voice. "Hold up," he said, stepping between us. "So you've been sitting on this success secretly? For how long?" "Years." He blinked. "And you never thought to use it to, I don't know, help the family?" I tilted my head, amused. Help the family that never believed in me? The family that thought theater was just finger puppets and fairy lights? He had no reply. I looked around. The table was set, guests were waiting. I turned to Madeline, my director. "We're ready." The dinner itself unfolded like a surreal stage play. Every course was plated like art, every moment choreographed, but not forced. It was natural, warm, welcoming, because I had built this world, and I belonged in it. As dessert arrived, a dark chocolate flan with burnt orange glaze, my father leaned closer to me. "Elena," he said, his voice low, "I owe you an apology." I looked at him, not with anger, but with something deeper, recognition. "When you were little," he continued, "you used to stage plays in the garage, remember?" "Of course," I smiled faintly. "Cardboard sets, bed sheets as curtains. I thought it was just a phase, but it wasn't. You saw something we didn't." "I saw me," I replied softly, "before anyone else did." He took a breath. "You built something incredible. Without our help. That takes more strength than I ever gave you credit for." For a moment, there was silence between us, a shared understanding, a quiet beginning of something new. Then, like clockwork, my mother interrupted. "Elena, the Clarks are asking about the mural in the lobby," she said stiffly. "Since you apparently own the place, perhaps you can enlighten them." Her voice was clipped, her smile brittle. "I'd be happy to," I replied, standing. "It's an original by Leticia Mendez, a Cuban-American artist. Her work explores the silence between generations." I let that last line hang in the air just long enough for her to hear the echo. After the dinner, as the guests trickled out with glowing faces and gift bags in hand, Stephanie, Diego's girlfriend, pulled me aside. "You've really changed," she said, studying me. "I mean, this is impressive." "I haven't changed," I said. "You just never saw me clearly." She didn't argue, just gave a tight nod, like she wasn't sure whether to feel impressed or threatened. My father hugged me before leaving. "I'm proud of you, Elena," he whispered. "Truly." It wasn't everything, but it was something. And as the last door closed behind them, I stood alone in the theater I built, no longer the invisible daughter or the artistic disappointment. I was Elena Ramirez, owner, creator, director of her own life. And the curtain had only just risen. The next morning, my phone lit up like a fire alarm. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 voice messages from Diego, and a text from Stephanie that simply read, "We need to talk. Can I stop by the theater today?" I didn't respond to any of them, not yet. Instead, I brewed a pot of dark roast Cuban coffee, sat in my sunlit penthouse kitchen, and did what I hadn't done in a long time. I let myself breathe. For years, I had been editing myself down to the version they could accept. The daughter who sent polite holiday texts, the one who must be struggling because she never bragged, the one they could pity without guilt. But last night flipped that script. They weren't angry because I embarrassed them. They were angry because I dismantled the hierarchy they built, and I wasn't going to rebuild it. I called Dr. Raina Cohen, my therapist, someone I'd been seeing off and on since the solstice opened. "Sounds like you pulled off a very theatrical truth bomb," she said with a chuckle when I recapped the dinner. "I didn't do it for drama," I told her. "I did it because they never listened, never asked. They built their narrative without me and I let them. That ends now." "So," she said gently, "what does now look like?" That question stuck with me, because this wasn't just about one night. This was about boundaries, the kind that aren't built with walls but with clarity. That afternoon, I drafted a short email and sent it to all three: Mom, Diego, and Dad. Subject: moving forward. Hi, family. Last night was important to me for many reasons. I understand it was surprising, maybe even shocking, but it wasn't meant to be a gotcha moment. It was meant to show you who I really am, because I'm no longer interested in being invisible in my own family. If we're going to have a relationship going forward, it needs to be built on mutual respect and transparency. I'm open to that, truly. But I'm also no longer available for conversations rooted in condescension, comparison, or manipulation. We'll talk, I'm sure of it. But for now, I'm setting boundaries. With love, Elena. Within 10 minutes, Diego replied, "Wow. Okay. Didn't realize you were going to go all corporate HR on us." I didn't reply. An hour later, my dad called. I answered. "Elena," he began quietly, "I read your email. I respect it. I really do. I just, I wish I'd seen all this sooner." "So do I said, "but I'm glad you're seeing it now. I'd like to talk. One-on-one, no drama, no mom, just us." That gave me pause. A part of me softened. "Come by the theater tomorrow," I said. "Not the public space, the office wing." "I'll bring pastries," he said. "Only if they're from Suarez Bakery." He laughed. "Would I bring anything else?" After we hung up, I turned back to my inbox, just in time for the email from Mom to come in. Short, curt, defensive. "I don't understand why you felt the need to make a spectacle of your success. You've always been private. Now you're punishing us for not knowing?" I sighed, not surprised. My mother didn't know how to apologize. She only knew how to defend her version of reality. But I wasn't interested in her version anymore. Later that night, Stephanie showed up at the theater, without Diego. She stood in the lobby awkwardly, glancing at the framed poster from our latest production. "Hey," she said, "this place is legit." "Thanks." We sat in one of the private side lounges. She fidgeted with her bracelet before finally speaking. "I didn't know," she said. "I mean, none of us did. I know. I guess I just thought, you like doing your little shows. I didn't realize you were building something this big." "That's the thing," I said. "I was never doing little anything. I was just doing it without permission." Stephanie nodded slowly. "Look, if I came off rude last night—" "You did," I cut in, not unkindly. She sighed. "Fair, I was just surprised." "Surprised is fine," I said. "But condescension isn't." A beat passed. Then she leaned forward. "Diego's freaking out, by the way. He keeps saying you played us." "I didn't play anyone," I said. "I just stopped hiding." Stephanie stared at me for a moment, then smiled. Small, almost respectful. "You know, I think they're more scared of you now than angry." I raised an eyebrow. "Good." The next morning, Dad arrived 5 minutes early, holding a white paper bag and 2 coffees in a cardboard tray. He was always punctual, sometimes to a fault. A man shaped by blue-collar discipline, years of hard hats and payroll deadlines, of showing up even when he didn't know what to say. He stood awkwardly in the private side entrance of the Solstice's administrative wing until I buzzed him in. "Suarez Bakery," he said, lifting the bag with a half smile. "Still warm." "Then I forgive you for everything," I joked. He laughed, nervous but genuine, and I led him into my office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the side alley, where snowflakes fell slowly against the old brick wall I'd once painted myself. There were books everywhere, theater scripts, business plans, framed photos from our first season. This wasn't just my workplace. It was my world. "Nice view," Dad said as he sat down. "It's quiet here. I like it that way." He nodded and sipped his coffee. We were quiet for a moment, both unwrapping guava and cheese pastelitos, a ritual from my childhood. Then he cleared his throat. "So," he said, "your email. It was strong, but fair." "I wasn't trying to be harsh," I said, "just honest." "I know," he replied. "That's what hit me the most." He looked around the room again, slower this time. "You built all this, and we didn't even notice." "I didn't hide it to punish you," I said softly. "I hid it because every time I shared a win, it got dismissed, brushed off, compared." He looked down. "I remember when you called to say you were directing your first play. Your mom said, 'Is it paid?' before you even finished." I nodded. "And when I said I bought this building, she asked if it was with someone else's money." He winced. "That was wrong. We were wrong." There it was, not a defensive explanation, not a redirect, an admission. I looked at him carefully. "Why, Dad? Why was it so hard to believe I could make something real?" He exhaled slowly. "Because it scared us." That caught me off guard. "You were always different," he continued. "Not in a bad way, just not easy to understand. Your mom and we grew up believing success meant one thing: stability, degrees, salaries, promotions. Diego fit that picture. You didn't, and I think we confused unfamiliar with unrealistic." I was quiet for a beat, letting that sink in. He looked straight at me, more direct than I remembered him being in years. "But we underestimated you, Elena. I did. And I'm sorry." My throat tightened. I hadn't cried the night of the dinner. Hadn't cried through Stephanie's fake smiles or my mother's brittle silence. But these words from the one person in my family who'd always stayed silent, they hit me like floodwater. "Thank you," I whispered. We sat in the quiet hum of the office for a few more minutes, eating our pastelitos like old friends rebuilding a bridge brick by brick. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You didn't just build a theater. You built a life no one handed to you. And now you've got the power to set the terms of who gets to be in it." I nodded slowly. "That's what I'm trying to do now. Set the terms." He smiled gently. "Good. Just don't lock the door behind you." "I'm not," I said, "but I am replacing the locks." He chuckled. "Fair enough." Before he left, he placed a small folded note on my desk. "I wrote something," he said, standing. "I'm better at saying things on paper." After he left, I opened it. "Elena, I can't undo the years we failed to see you. But I can start showing up now, not as a father who wants to fix things, just as a man who finally sees his daughter for who she really is. Not dramatic, not defiant, just extraordinary." Duh, I sat back in my chair, eyes glassy, heart pounding, not from pain, but from peace. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was something purer, recognition. 2 days later, my mother requested a meeting. Well, requested might be generous. She called my assistant, demanded to know why I wasn't answering her texts, then showed up unannounced at the solstice, expecting to be ushered directly into my office. Instead, she was politely informed that I was unavailable and would need to be scheduled. She was not pleased. 10 minutes after she stormed out, I received the inevitable text. "This is ridiculous. I am your mother, not a client. We need to speak." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty ignoring it. Instead, I forwarded the message to Dr. Cohen, my therapist. She replied almost immediately. "You set a boundary. She hit it. Now we hold it." That's how we ended up, 2 days later, in a neutral setting. Dr. Cohen's office, a warm space with sunlit windows and 2 soft gray chairs facing a round table. No stage, no audience. Just 2 women who had spent decades pretending their silences were normal. My mother arrived 5 minutes late, wearing a structured navy blazer like she was heading into a deposition. Her mouth was tight. Her eyes were unreadable. "Elena," she said with a polite nod, as if we were strangers meeting at a charity auction. "Hi, Mom." Dr. Cohen welcomed us both and set the tone quickly, calm, direct, safe. "We're not here to rehash every past wound," she said. "We're here to understand each other better and establish healthier ways to move forward." My mother crossed one leg over the other. "Fine by me." So I began. I laid it out, not with tears or anger, but with facts. How it felt when I was told my dreams weren't real careers. How every achievement I worked for was met with skepticism or silence. How Stephanie's every minor success was celebrated, while mine were treated like distractions. How the night of Dad's birthday she whispered, "Don't embarrass us," and meant it. She didn't interrupt, but she didn't soften either. When I finished, Dr. Cohen turned to her. "Carmen, would you like to respond?" My mother sat perfectly still. "I think Elena has misunderstood a lot of our intentions," she said evenly. "We always wanted what was best for her, but sometimes wanting what's best means being realistic." "Realistic or dismissive?" I asked gently. Her eyes flashed. "You never made it easy. You rejected our advice. You chose paths we didn't understand." "That's not the same as not supporting me," I said. "You didn't ask questions. You made assumptions. You decided what was worthy, and I was never on that list." Something cracked in her posture, but she recovered quickly. "We gave you a roof, a good education." "You paid for Diego's graduate school," I said. "You gave Stephanie a down payment for her first condo. I worked 3 jobs and lived in a basement to start this life." Silence. Then her voice, low, sharp. "You lied to us." I blinked. "What?" "This whole reveal, the dinner, the staff calling you Ms. Ramirez. You humiliated us." "I didn't lie," I said. "I simply stopped telling you things because it hurt to be ignored." Her jaw clenched. "You planned that moment to make us look foolish." "I planned it," I replied, "to stop looking foolish to you." The room fell quiet. Dr. Cohen let the silence stretch, let it breathe. Finally, my mother looked away. "I don't know how to undo any of that," she said. Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to be close to a daughter who doesn't need me." And there it was, the truth. Not anger, not spite, fear. "I do need you," I said, "but not to approve of me. I need you to see me, and I need you to respect me, even if you don't understand everything I do." She blinked fast, as if tears were trying to fight their way out. "I thought I was protecting you." "No," I said. "You were protecting yourself from the discomfort of having a daughter you couldn't control." She finally looked at me. For real. Eyes red, voice small. "What now?" "Now," I said, "we start again. With honesty, with boundaries, with mutual respect. No more pretending." She nodded, slowly, carefully. "I don't know if I can do that perfectly." "I'm not asking for perfect," I said. "Just honest." We sat in silence for a while longer. Not tense, not finished, but real. When the session ended, she stood up and hesitated. Then, almost awkwardly, she hugged me. It wasn't warm. Not yet. But it was something. A few days after the session with Mom, I received a text from Stephanie. "Hey, got a few ideas I'd love to run by you. Coffee at that cafe near the solstice tomorrow. My treat." It wasn't unusual for Stephanie to reach out post-dramatics. She was good at reading the room. She knew when the tide had shifted, knew when charm would get her further than confrontation. I agreed. The next day, I walked into Luna and Bean, a sleek little cafe 2 blocks from my theater. Stephanie was already seated near the window, sipping an oat milk latte and wearing a crisp cream blazer, like she'd just stepped out of a real estate commercial. "Elena," she beamed, standing up like we were old college roommates. "You look amazing." "You too," I said, sitting. "What's up?" We made small talk for a bit. Weather, shows at the solstice, how Diego still hadn't shut up about the dinner. I half listened. Something about the way her smile lingered too long made me wary. Then came the pivot. So, she began, lowering her voice like we were discussing state secrets. I've been talking to some partners at my firm, and we've been brainstorming some really exciting opportunities. I blinked. Opportunities for what? For collaboration, she said brightly. We host a lot of client events, retreats, panels, and your theater would be perfect. It's chic, it's exclusive, and after last week, everyone's talking about it. Who's everyone? She waved a manicured hand. Our people. Clients. You know, the circle. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I'm flattered, I said. But the solstice isn't really designed for corporate branding events. Oh, come on, she said, laughing. Everything's a brand these days. There it was, the real reason she'd reached out. It wasn't reconciliation. It was leverage, a chance to turn my hard-earned success into a convenient asset for her curated image. I leaned forward slightly. Stephanie, are you asking for a family discount? She blinked. Well, I assumed we could work something out. It's not like we're strangers. No, we're sisters, I said, which is exactly why I don't mix family and business without crystal clear boundaries. She shifted in her seat. Elena, come on. It's not like I'm trying to use you. I tilted my head. You're asking for discounted access to a space you mocked me for creating. Just last week. She flushed. That's not fair. It's honest. A long pause. She fiddled with her sleeve, then gave me a thin smile. You've changed. No, I said. You're just seeing me differently. She looked out the window for a moment, then turned back with a softer tone. All right, no discounts. I get it. We'll book through your regular process. Thank you. But, she added quickly, I meant what I said. I really am impressed. And I do want to be closer. For real. That part I didn't fully trust. Not yet. But I didn't shut it down either. Then let's start with this, I offered. Coffee. No proposals, no pitches, just sisters figuring out if we can rebuild something honest. She looked surprised, then nodded. I'd like that. We ended the meeting on that tentative note, neither cold nor warm, just neutral territory. That night, over dinner in my penthouse, Marcus leaned back in his chair and gave me a look. She came with a pitch, didn't she? She did, I said, smirking. Let me guess. She called it a win-win? Bingo. He laughed. Do you regret opening the door? No, I said, but I'm keeping the key in my own pocket. He raised his glass. To control. To clarity, I replied, clinking his glass with mine. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about building relationships that didn't cost me pieces of myself. And this time, I was finally charging full price. It was a Sunday evening when I returned to my parents' house for the first family dinner since the big reveal. The same stucco walls, the same creaky front gate, the smell of roast pork and citrus drifting from the kitchen, just like it did when I was 10 years old and still believed approval came with dessert. But something was different. It wasn't the house that had changed. It was me. As I stepped inside, I noticed the little things first. Framed photos rearranged on the wall. Diego's business award still had prime position, but next to it was something new. A magazine cover. There I was, standing on the solstice stage, arms crossed, beneath the headline, "The Visionary Behind Chicago's Theater Renaissance." I blinked. My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She followed my gaze and cleared her throat. Diego printed that from the online version, she said. I told him the living room needed some balance. Balance. From her, that was practically a peace treaty. I smiled faintly. It looks good there. She nodded once, then returned to the kitchen without another word. Inside the dining room, my father was already seated, placing ceramic bowls of black beans and rice on the table with an ease I remembered from childhood. He looked up and grinned. There she is, stars of the stage. Hardly, I said, chuckling. More like queen of spreadsheets. Still counts. We shared a look, one built on our recent talk, the softness that had begun to return between us. Mom reappeared with the pork roast. Stephanie followed behind her, holding a bottle of wine. Imported, she said with a smirk. No family discounts were used in the acquisition of this bottle. I raised an eyebrow. Duly noted. We took our seats. For a moment, the clink of silverware and the passing of dishes replaced any tension. It felt almost normal, until Mom cleared her throat. "So," she said, her voice a little too casual, "I've been working with the Women in Business League on a charity gala. They asked if I knew any venues that support women-led initiatives." All eyes turned to me. "Oh?" I said carefully. "Yes," she continued, "and I told them I might know someone." Stephanie gave me a side glance, barely concealing a smirk. I set my fork down slowly. "Mom, are you suggesting the solstice as a venue?" She straightened in her seat. "Only if it makes sense. Of course. You're very busy." "I am," I said. "But I'm also open to hosting events that align with our mission." "And the gala supports scholarships for young women in entrepreneurship," she added quickly, "which I thought might interest you, given your foundation." I blinked. She had done research. Real research, not just name-dropping. "I'll have my events coordinator connect with your committee," I said finally. "We'll treat it like any other partnership, with a proposal and timeline." She nodded. "Of course." There was an awkward pause. Then Stephanie raised her glass. "To progress," she said. We clinked. It wasn't harmony, but it wasn't combat either. And then my mother surprised me again. As we cleared the plates, she motioned me toward the hallway. "I want to show you something." I followed her down the narrow corridor. Same beige wallpaper, same faint scent of lemon cleaner. But when we reached the hallway closet, she opened it to reveal a stack of old boxes. The top one was labeled Elena College. She opened it. Inside were flyers from my earliest shows, old notebooks, scribbled scripts, even a playbill from my senior thesis. "I kept them," she said, not looking at me. "Even when I said none of it would go anywhere, I kept them." I stared down at the mess of papers. My past, my younger self, preserved in ink and ambition. "You never said anything," I whispered. "I didn't know how," she admitted. "But I read them sometimes, when I missed you." The weight of her words landed like a stone dropped in still water. "I missed you too," I said. She closed the box carefully. "I don't know how to be the mother you needed then," she said. "But I'd like to try being the one you need now. It wasn't everything, but it was enough." As I drove home that night, back to my theater, back to my life, I realized something I hadn't expected. They hadn't changed completely, but they were trying. And for the first time, so was I. Not to earn their approval, but to accept their imperfect attempts at love. 6 months later, I stood alone on the rooftop garden of the solstice, the space I had once dreamed about while sweeping the aisles of community theaters and scribbling monologues under flickering lights. Now, it was real. String lights danced above rows of ivy, the skyline of Chicago glittered like a silent orchestra, and down below, the seats of my theater were filled again. Tonight's show was a sold-out new play written by one of our scholarship recipients. I had named the program the Judith Leland Fellowship, after the woman who first believed in me. And now, I was paying that belief forward. The theater was no longer just a place for performance. It had become a platform. For bold voices, for underdogs, for dreamers who, like me, had once been told their passion wasn't practical. Inside my office, photos of my early days still hung beside press features and award plaques, not as decoration, but as anchors, reminders of where I started, and how far I'd come not just in business, but in truth. Because the real win wasn't owning a building or making the cover of magazines. It was the peace that came from no longer asking for anyone's permission to exist. My phone buzzed, a message from my father. "Saw your quote in Forbes this morning. Proud doesn't even begin to cover it." Then a second message from my mother. "Just recommended the solstice to a friend planning her daughter's quinceañera. Told her the owner is a genius. My daughter." I smiled. She still said it like she was showing off. But now I could let her. Because it came from a place of pride, not control. Stephanie had even followed through on our new rhythm. We had lunch once a month. No pitches, no agendas, just conversation. Some awkward, some surprisingly good. It would never be perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. Later that evening, I sat with Marcus in the back row of the theater as the curtain fell and applause filled the room. He leaned over and whispered, "Remember when you said you weren't doing all this for revenge?" I nodded. "Still true?" I smiled. Revenge would have been making them regret underestimating me. This is me not needing their approval anymore. This is me living so fully that their doubts don't get to matter. He raised an eyebrow. And yet, they came around. Because I stopped waiting for them to. When the lights came up, I stayed behind a moment, letting the last echoes of the performance settle into the velvet. This stage was mine, not just the one below, but the one I stood on every day, the one I built, the one I finally owned, not just in name, but in spirit. Epilogue. Sometimes I still think about the night of my father's birthday, about the look on my mother's face, the silence from Diego, the weight of being seen for the first time. But now those memories don't sting. They just remind me of what I survived, and how I turned dismissal into power, judgment into joy, silence into voice. To anyone who's ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most, let them. Let them doubt. Let them look away. Because one day they'll walk into the room you built with your own hands and realize they never saw you coming.